The massive golden chamber of the Galactic Council had never been this quiet before. Thousands of alien representatives from across the galaxy sat in their floating seats, all staring down at one small human woman. Admiral HFY Park looked tiny compared to the towering creatures around her, but she didn't seem worried at all. Ambassador Kexmora, a blue-skinned alien with 4 arms, stood up and spoke in a voice that echoed through the chamber. His words were cold and final. "The decision has been made, human. Your species has exactly 72 hours to abandon all your outer colonies. You will then report to our designated zones for what we call protective custody." The alien crowd began to laugh. It started as quiet chuckles but grew louder and louder. The sound was horrible, like thousands of different creatures all finding the same joke hilarious. They thought humans were weak. They thought Earth's people were just another primitive species that could be pushed around. HFY had heard this kind of laughter before. Every species in the galaxy seemed to think humans were nothing special. Sure, humans had managed to travel between stars and build colonies on distant worlds, but compared to races that had been exploring space for millions of years, Earth's people were considered babies. "Protective custody," HFY repeated quietly, almost to herself. She knew what those words really meant. It was slavery dressed up in fancy language. The Council wanted to control humanity completely, to make sure Earth's people could never become a threat to their power. But HFY wasn't afraid. In fact, she was almost smiling. While the aliens continued their mocking laughter, she reached into her jacket and pulled out a small silver device. It was no bigger than her palm and it looked completely harmless. The laughter started to fade as aliens noticed what she was doing. HFY pressed a button on the device, and suddenly the air above the chamber filled with bright, colorful holograms. The images showed star maps, but these weren't ordinary maps that showed planets and suns. These maps showed something else entirely. They showed dark matter concentrations around each and every homeworld of the Council members. Dark matter was invisible to most species, but these readings were incredibly detailed. They showed exactly how much dark matter surrounded each alien planet, down to the smallest measurement. The chamber fell completely silent. Every alien representative stared at the holographic displays floating above their heads. They could see their own worlds, their own star systems mapped out in ways they had never seen before. The most shocking part wasn't just that humans could detect dark matter this precisely. It was that they had been watching. For how long? How much did humans really know about the galaxy's hidden secrets? HFY stood up slowly and looked around the chamber. Her voice was calm and steady when she spoke. "We know you've been watching us," she said simply. "Studying us, planning what to do with us." She paused and smiled. "Now you know we've been watching back." The silence stretched on. No one laughed anymore. The Council's most advanced monitoring stations across the galaxy started picking up readings. That made no sense. Their sensors, which could detect a single ship from light years away, were going crazy. Massive gravitational signatures were appearing out of nowhere in human space, then vanishing just as quickly. The readings showed objects the size of battleships, sometimes entire fleets, but when the Council tried to get a closer look, there was nothing there, just empty space. Their scientists ran diagnostic after diagnostic, convinced their equipment was broken. But every monitoring station was reporting the same impossible data. Admiral Vorthak of the Beltari military was getting frustrated. "It's obviously some kind of human trick," he told his officers aboard the flagship Dominator. "They're probably using some primitive jamming technology to confuse our sensors. Once we get there, we'll see how weak they really are." The Beltari were known throughout the galaxy as the Council's hammer. When diplomacy failed, they were the ones who made rebellious species fall in line. Their ships were massive, their weapons could crack planets, and they had never lost a war. Vorthak's fleet jumped into the Tau Ceti system expecting to find human colonies ready for conquest. The system had 3 planets with human settlements, space stations and mining operations. Intelligence reports said millions of humans lived there, but when they arrived, they found nothing. Not just no human ships, no humans at all. The planets were empty. The space stations were dark and abandoned. Even the mining equipment was gone. It was like every human in the system had simply vanished. "Run a full sensor sweep," Vorthak ordered. "They have to be hiding somewhere." His officers worked frantically at their stations, but the readings made no sense. Their sensors showed massive objects moving through space, but they couldn't see anything. Gravitational fields were shifting and changing around them, but there was nothing there to cause it. Then the attacks started. The first Beltari ship, the Crusher, was torn apart in seconds. Its thick metal hull was sliced through like paper by something that didn't show up on any scanner. The ship's distress signal lasted only a few seconds before it was cut off completely. Vorthak watched in horror as more of his ships were destroyed by invisible forces. Weapons fire came from empty space, tearing through his fleet's shields like they weren't even there. His ships tried to fight back, but they were shooting at nothing. "What's happening?" Vorthak screamed at his sensor operator. "What's destroying my ships?" "I don't know, sir," the officer replied, panic in his voice. "The sensors show nothing, but something is definitely attacking us." Within 10 minutes, half of Vorthak's mighty fleet was destroyed or heavily damaged. The remaining ships were defenseless against an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't target, and couldn't understand. Vorthak opened a general broadcast channel, his voice shaking with fear. "This is Admiral Vorthak of the Beltari fleet. We surrender. We surrender unconditionally. Please stop the attack." His words echoed into empty space. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then a calm human voice responded from nowhere, seeming to come from the void itself. "Message received." Deep inside a secret research facility hidden beneath the mountains of Earth, Dr. Minho Kim stood before a room full of his most trusted scientists. But these weren't ordinary scientists anymore. Their eyes held a strange, distant look, as if they were seeing things that shouldn't exist. "I know you're all scared," Minho said quietly, looking at each face in the room. "I know what we've discovered feels impossible, maybe even dangerous, but I need you to understand what we've actually accomplished here." Dr. Hai Jin Lee, one of his oldest colleagues, raised her shaking hand. "Minho, my sensors are picking up readings from inside my own body. That's not normal. That's not human." Minho nodded sadly. He had expected this conversation for months. "You're right, Hijin. None of this is normal, but let me explain what's really happening and why it was necessary." He walked over to a large screen that showed a view of space. But this wasn't the space that most people knew about. The space filled with stars and planets and the things you could actually see. For thousands of years, every species in the galaxy has been fighting over the same small piece of reality, Minho began. They fight over planets, over energy sources, over territory they can see and touch. But they've been ignoring the biggest part of the universe. He pressed a button, and the screen changed. Now it showed the same view of space, but filled with swirling, ghostly structures that seemed to move through everything. "Dark matter," he continued. "It makes up 85% of everything that exists. Every other species treats it like it's not even there. But we learned something they didn't. Dark matter isn't empty space. It's not nothing. It's everything." The scientists stared at the screen in fascination and terror. They could see structures in the dark matter that looked almost like buildings, like roads, like an entire hidden universe existing in the same space as the normal one. While the aliens were building bigger guns and faster ships, we were learning to see what they couldn't, Minho explained. "We found ways to interact with dark matter, to control it, to use it. Our ships don't just travel through space anymore. They exist partially in the dark matter realm." Dr. Junwoo Park, the youngest member of the team, spoke up nervously. "But the side effects, Minho. The crews who pilot these ships, they're changing. They can see through walls sometimes. They know things they shouldn't know. Are we still human?" Minho was quiet for a long moment. This was the hardest part to explain. "The technology is changing us," he admitted. "When you spend time integrated with dark matter, it leaves its mark. The crews can perceive things in multiple dimensions now. They can sense dark matter structures that surround every planet, every star. They're becoming something new." "Something better?" Hijin asked. "Something necessary," Minho replied. "The aliens think they're fighting humans, but they're not. They're facing the next step in human evolution. We're not just using dark matter as a weapon. We're becoming part of it. And that's the only way we're going to survive what's coming. Captain Tae-jun Lee stood on the bridge of the UES Shadow, but to anyone watching, he would have seemed like he was floating in a dream. His eyes were closed, yet he could see everything around him with perfect clarity. This wasn't the normal kind of seeing that humans had always known. This was something completely different. Captain called out Lieutenant So Young-han from her station. Her voice had a strange echoing quality to it, as if it was coming from far away and very close at the same time. The Council fleet is approaching Sector 7. They have no idea we're here. Tae-jun opened his eyes slowly. When he did, the normal view of space through the ship's windows looked almost boring compared to what he could see with his enhanced vision. The stars were still there, but now he could also see the rivers of dark matter flowing between them like invisible highways. "I can see them," he said softly. 23 Council ships moving in formation. They're flying right through a dark matter storm and they don't even know it. The crew of the Shadow had all been changed by their time aboard the ship. They existed in what Dr. Min-ho Kim called a twilight state. Not fully human anymore, but not completely something else either. They could perceive the hidden layer of reality that surrounded everything. "It's incredible," whispered Engineer Dong-hyun Choi as he monitored the ship's systems. "They're flying blind. They can't see the dark matter currents that are flowing all around them. One wrong move and those currents could crush their ships like tin cans." Tae-jun nodded. It was both fascinating and terrifying to watch. The Council fleets moved through space like ancient ships trying to navigate by starlight, while the Shadow could see every current, every flow, every dangerous area to avoid. "Show me the wider view," Tae-jun ordered. The ship's display systems, which had been modified to work with dark matter perception, showed him something that would have been impossible for normal humans to understand. The entire galaxy was crisscrossed with dark matter structures, vast networks that connected every star system, every planet, every point in space. "It's like a giant spider web," said Navigation Officer Ye-jin Park. "But instead of being made of silk, it's made of the universe's most abundant material. And somehow we're the only ones who can see it." Tae-jun walked closer to the display. His enhanced vision allowed him to see even more detail. There were dark matter highways that could allow instant travel between distant star systems. There were dark matter storms that could destroy entire fleets. There were even what looked like dark matter cities, massive structures that seemed to exist in a different dimension. "The other species have been flying through space for millions of years," he said quietly. "But they've been flying through only a tiny part of what's really there. They see the surface of reality, but we can see the foundation underneath." Lieutenant So Young looked up from her station. "Captain, should we reveal ourselves to the Council fleet?" Tae-jun smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "Not yet. Let them keep stumbling around in the dark. They wanted to treat humanity like children who didn't understand the universe. Now they'll learn that we understand it better than they ever could." The Shadow continued to watch, invisible and untouchable, as the Council fleet sailed blindly through the hidden architecture of the cosmos. Supreme Commander Zalkar stood on the bridge of the Worldbreaker, the largest warship ever built by the Galactic Council. Around him, the greatest armada in galactic history had assembled, over 2,000 ships including 12 planet-killer dreadnoughts that could crack worlds in half. "This ends today," Zalkar declared to his officers. "Enough games. Enough mysterious disappearances. We're going to Earth and we're going to show these humans what real power looks like." The armada had traveled from across the galaxy. Every major species had contributed their most powerful warships. The Krexthari brought their reality-bending cruisers. The Volmec sent their quantum torpedo destroyers. Even the ancient Ethborin had awakened their sleeping war machines. "Human resistance has been nothing but tricks and illusions," Zalkar continued. "They hide behind technology we don't understand, but raw firepower beats tricks every time. Today, we end this rebellion." As the massive fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system, the aliens expected to find a desperate human defense force waiting for them. Instead, they found something that looked almost peaceful. Earth hung in space like a blue jewel, surrounded by a few orbital stations and some scattered defense platforms. "That's it. asked Commander Vexthul, Zalkar's second-in-command. "This is what we brought the entire armada to destroy? A few orbital stations?" Zalkar frowned. Something felt wrong. After all the mysterious attacks, after entire fleets disappearing, he had expected Earth to be surrounded by powerful defenses. Instead, it looked almost unprotected. "Begin bombardment positions," he ordered. "Target the orbital stations first, then the planet's major cities. We'll make this quick." The dreadnoughts began charging their planet-killer weapons. Energy readings across the fleet climbed as thousands of ships prepared to unleash destruction on humanity's homeworld. The firepower assembled here could destroy 100 Earths. "Weapons charged and ready, Supreme Commander," reported the weapons. "Officer, fire!" Zalkar commanded. Nothing happened. "Sir, weapons are not responding," the officer said, panic creeping into his voice. "What do you mean, not responding?" Zalkar demanded. Suddenly, alarms started blaring across every ship in the fleet. Officers shouted reports from their stations as systems began failing one by one. "Engines are offline. Shields won't activate. Communications are down. Life support is fluctuating." Then, like ghosts materializing from thin air, hundreds of human warships began appearing around the Council fleet. They seemed to phase into existence from nowhere, their hulls crackling with energy that hurt to look at directly. The Council armada found itself completely surrounded. Human ships appeared above them, below them, and on all sides. The aliens were trapped in the middle of a sphere of enemy vessels. "How is this possible?" Vexthul whispered. That's when they realized the horrible truth. Every system on their ships had been compromised. Not by visible attackers or conventional weapons, but by something they couldn't see or understand. Dark matter viruses had infected every computer, every control system, every piece of technology they had. Admiral HFY Park's voice came through the communication systems of every council ship simultaneously. "Supreme Commander Zalkar," she said calmly. "You came here to destroy our world with superior firepower, but you brought your weapons into our domain. Every ship in your fleet is now under our control. Your war is over. The greatest armada in galactic history had been defeated without firing a single shot." Admiral HFY Park walked into the detention center aboard the human flagship, where the captured council commanders were being held. But something was different about her appearance. Her eyes seemed to shimmer with depth that shouldn't exist, and when she moved, there were moments where she appeared slightly transparent, as if she wasn't completely there. Supreme Commander Zalkar looked up from his cell. "What have you done to us, human? Our ships, our weapons, nothing works anymore." HFY pulled up a chair and sat down across from the alien commanders. "I think it's time you understood what you're really facing," she said quietly. "This was never just about better weapons or hidden ships. You're witnessing something that's never happened before in the galaxy's history." Commander Vexthul pressed against the energy barrier of his cell. "Explain yourself. What kind of technology can disable entire fleets without firing a shot?" "It's not just technology," HFY replied. "It's evolution. When we first discovered how to interact with dark matter, we thought we were just building better ships. We had no idea we were changing ourselves." She stood up and walked to a large window that showed the human fleet outside, but as the alien commanders watched, they could see something impossible. There were human crew members moving between the ships, not in shuttles or transport pods, but walking through space itself, phasing in and out of visibility. "Our children," HFY continued, "the ones born on ships that exist partially in the dark matter realm, they're different. They can see things that exist in multiple dimensions at once. They can communicate with each other across vast distances without any technology at all." Zalkar's voice was barely a whisper. "That's impossible. No species can survive in the vacuum of space." "No normal species," HFY corrected. "But we're not normal anymore. Watch." A young human appeared in the corridor outside the detention cells. She looked to be about 12 years old, but her eyes held an ancient quality that made the alien commanders uncomfortable. As they watched, she walked straight through the solid metal wall as if it wasn't there. "This is my daughter, Su Jin," HFY said calmly. "She was born on one of our dark matter integrated vessels. She exists partially outside what you call normal reality. The girl, Su-Jin, looked at the captured aliens with curiosity rather than fear. When she spoke, her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "They can't see the rivers," she said to her mother. "They fly through space, but they can't see the currents that connect everything. How do they navigate?" Commander Vexthul backed. "Away from the energy barrier." "What is she?" "She's what humanity is becoming," Jihai answered. "Our scientists estimate that within 2 generations, most humans will have some level of dark matter integration. We'll be able to perceive dimensions of reality that other species can't even imagine." Zalkar's expression changed from anger to something closer to terror. "You're not human anymore." "We're more than human," Jihai replied. "And that's why your council's plans were doomed from the start. You were trying to enslave a species that was already evolving beyond your understanding. You brought weapons designed to fight in 3 dimensions against beings who exist in many more than that." Su-Jin walked closer to Zalkar's cell. "Don't be afraid," she said gently. "Change is coming for everyone. The Dark Ones are watching now. They're interested in what we're becoming." The alien commanders looked at each other with growing dread, finally beginning to understand that they hadn't just lost a war, they had encountered something entirely new. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike any in the organization's 10,000-year history. Representatives from hundreds of species sat in their floating chairs, but this time they weren't the ones making demands. They were the ones receiving them. "Admiral." Jihai Park stood in the center of the great chamber, but she wasn't alone. Around her, barely visible, other humans phased in and out of sight. Some appeared completely solid, others looked like ghosts, and a few seemed to exist as nothing more than shifting shadows. "The terms are simple," Jihai announced, her voice carrying clearly through the massive space. "Complete dissolution of the Galactic Council's governing authority, full reparations to humanity for your attempted genocide, and recognition of human sovereignty over all dark matter space throughout the galaxy." Council leader Thexvar, an ancient being whose species had ruled for millennia, trembled with rage. "Impossible! You cannot simply dissolve an institution that has maintained galactic peace for thousands of years." "Peace?" Jihai repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Is that what you call threatening to enslave entire species? Because from where I stand, that sounds more like tyranny." The representatives looked around nervously. Through the chamber's great windows, they could see their homeworlds in the distance, but they could also see the faint outlines of human ships surrounding each planet, ships that appeared and disappeared like mirages. "You have 24 hours to consider our terms," Jihai continued. "Any species that agrees will be left in peace to govern themselves. Any that refuse will discover just how much of their technology depends on systems we can now control." Most of the alien representatives were already calculating how quickly they could agree to the human demands. The destruction of the Great Armada had shown them the futility of military resistance. But one voice rang out in defiance. "The Velkari hegemony will never bow to inferior species," declared High Chancellor Morthak, his forearms raised in a gesture of absolute refusal. "We have ruled our sector for 5,000 years, and we will not be intimidated by human tricks." Jihai looked at him with something that might have been pity. "I was hoping we wouldn't need to provide a demonstration." "Your threats mean nothing to us," Morthak continued. "The Velkari are warriors. We do not surrender." Jihi nodded to one of the ghostly figures beside her. "Begin the demonstration," she said quietly. Thousands of light years away on the Velkari homeworld of Morthani, something impossible began to happen. The great capital city, home to billions of proud warriors, started to become transparent. It began slowly. Citizens walking down the street noticed that their hands looked strange. They could see through their own skin. Buildings that had stood for centuries suddenly appeared ghostly and translucent. Vehicles driving through the city found themselves passing through walls and other vehicles as if they weren't really there. Panic spread through the city as the Velkari realized they were losing their connection to normal reality. They could still breathe, still think, but they couldn't touch anything solid. Doors wouldn't open because their hands passed right through the handles. Food and water became impossible to consume because it fell through their ghostly fingers. The city's communication systems, somehow still working, broadcast frantic messages to the council chambers. Citizens screamed as they fell through floors, only to find themselves standing in the rooms below. Parents watched in horror as their children walked through walls, laughing because they thought it was a game. High Chancellor Morthak watched the broadcast from his homeworld with growing terror. His proud capital city had become a city of ghosts, and his people were helpless. "Make it stop!" he screamed at Jihai. "Whatever you're doing, make it stop!" 1 hour, Jihai replied calmly. "The demonstration will last exactly 1 hour, then everything will return to normal." When the hour ended, the Velkari hegemony's surrender came within minutes. 6 months after the Council's surrender, the galaxy had become a very different place. The old meeting chambers where alien species once made decisions for everyone else now stood empty. Instead, representatives from across the galaxy traveled to a new kind of gathering, one where humans set the rules. Ambassador Sujin Choi stepped out of her transport ship onto the neutral space station that had become the galaxy's new diplomatic center. But anyone who remembered humans from before the war would have been shocked by her appearance. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, her once normal human frame stretched and elegant. Her eyes held depths that seemed to go on forever, like looking into the dark spaces between stars. When she spoke to welcome the alien delegates, her voice had a strange quality. It wasn't just the words they heard. It was as if her meaning was being placed directly into their minds, bypassing their ears entirely. "Welcome to the first Galactic Accords under human oversight," she said. And every species present understood her perfectly, even though she was speaking in human language. "Today, we establish new rules for how everyone will travel through space." The key. Alien delegates sat nervously in their chairs. These weren't the proud, arrogant beings who had once demanded humanity's surrender. These were frightened representatives who had seen what happened to species that defied the new order. "The old way of space travel is over," Sujin continued, walking among the delegates. As she moved, some of them noticed that she cast no shadow, and her footsteps made no sound. "You've been flying through space like children playing in a sandbox, completely unaware of the forces you're disturbing." She gestured, and a holographic display filled the center of the room. It showed the galaxy, but not as the aliens had ever seen it before. Dark matter currents flowed between every star system, like rivers of invisible energy. Every time you use faster-than-light travel, you create ripples in these currents, Sujin explained. "Some of your routes have been damaging the fundamental structure of space itself. This ends now." Elder Vectar from the Astrian Republic raised a tentative hand. What are the new rules?" "Ooh, simple," Sujin replied, her voice carrying that strange harmonic quality that made his mind tingle. "All faster-than-light travel must follow approved routes through the dark matter currents. Species that comply will find their journeys faster and safer than ever before. They'll also find themselves under our protection. And those who don't comply?" asked Representative Korhan from the Nexus worlds. Sujin's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "Let me show you what happened to the Threxky system last week." The holographic display changed to show a star system where the Threxky had ignored human warnings and continued using their old destructive travel methods. The system's star was flickering unstably, sending out dangerous radiation bursts. "Their star is experiencing what we call dark matter poisoning," Sujin explained calmly. "The Threxky kept tearing holes in the dark matter currents around their system. Now those currents are unstable, and their star is responding to the disturbance." The alien delegates stared in horror at the display. The Threxky homeworld was already being evacuated as their sun became increasingly unpredictable. Is there anything that can be done for them?" Elder Vectar asked quietly. "Of course," Sujin replied. "They've agreed to follow our new travel protocols. Our specialists are already working to stabilize their star. Species that cooperate with us find that we can be very helpful." She walked back to the center of the room, and as she did, several other humans materialized around her. They were all changed like she was. Taller, more ethereal, their eyes holding impossible depths. "The galaxy is under new management," Sujin announced. "We're not here to rule you like the old council did. We're here to protect you from dangers." you can't even see. Follow our guidance and you'll find the universe a much safer place than it used to be. 5 years had passed since the fall of the Galactic Council, and the universe had settled into an uneasy peace. The Great Assembly Hall, where Ambassador Ji-Hai Park now stood, was unlike anything that had existed before. The podium she spoke from seemed to exist in several places at once, shifting between dimensions as she moved. Behind her, dozens of humans flickered in and out of visibility like living ghosts. Some appeared completely solid for a few seconds, before becoming transparent. Others looked like they were made of starlight itself, their forms constantly shifting and changing. The alien representatives in the audience had grown used to these impossible sights, but they still felt uncomfortable. These weren't the humans they remembered from 5 years ago. These beings were something entirely new. "I know many of you have wondered why we did what we did," Ji-Hai began, her voice carrying across multiple dimensions. "Why we destroyed your fleets, dissolved your council, and took control of galactic affairs. You've assumed it was about power, about conquest, about revenge." She paused, and the humans behind her seemed to shimmer with anticipation. "You were wrong," she continued. "Everything we did was preparation, because we discovered something that terrified us more than any war ever could." The room fell completely silent. Even the species that had fought against humanity the longest leaned forward to listen. The dark matter realm, the invisible universe that makes up most of reality, it isn't empty, Ji-Hai revealed. It's inhabited. It has been for billions of years, long before your stars were born, long before any of us existed. A collective gasp went through the audience. Several alien representatives stood up in shock. These beings, we call them the Dark Ones, are older than time itself, Ji-Hai continued. They've watched the rise and fall of countless civilizations. They've seen species like yours build empires, fight wars, and eventually destroy themselves. And for the most part, they've remained hidden, content to observe. Representative Kexlan from the Outer Rim colonies spoke up nervously. "What changed? Why are you telling us this now?" Ji-Hai's expression grew grave. "Because your technology, your wars, your constant disruption of space-time through faster-than-light travel, it's becoming too loud. The Dark Ones are starting to notice and they're not happy." Behind her, one of the ghostly humans stepped forward. This one looked more solid than the others, but his eyes were completely black, like looking into deep space. "We made contact with them 3 years ago," the figure said, his voice seeming to come from everywhere at once. "At first, they were ready to eliminate all matter-based life in this galaxy. They saw us as a noise problem that needed to be silenced." The alien. Delegates looked at each other in growing terror. "But humanity impressed them," Ji-Hai continued. "We showed them that some species could evolve, could learn to exist in harmony with the dark matter realm instead of just disrupting it. We proved that matter-based life didn't have to be destructive." She walked closer to the audience, and as she did, some of the aliens could see that she was partially transparent, existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "The Dark Ones agreed to give the galaxy one chance," she said. "They made us the guardians, the teachers. Our job is to help other species evolve to a higher level of existence. Those who can learn, who can adapt, who can become more than just matter and energy, they'll survive." "And those who can't?" asked Elder Morthek in a whisper. Ji-Hai's voice became deadly serious. "The Dark Ones are patient, but their patience isn't infinite. Species that remain too disruptive, too primitive, too dangerous to the stability of space-time itself." She paused. "They'll be removed." The room erupted in panicked voices, but Ji-Hai raised her hand for silence. "That's why we're here," she said. "Not as conquerors, but as teachers. We're going to help you evolve, just like we did. The choice is yours. Grow beyond what you are now, or face extinction when the Dark Ones decide you've become too much of a problem."